Every time you add a human into any part of any process, you increase bias. And every time you add AI into any part of a process, you decrease bias. And he goes, and I can measure that with data.
Welcome to the Tech Savvy Recruiter, the podcast for recruitment and staffing agency owners keen to explore the tech innovations reshaping our industry. I'm Andrew Roger from RecMate.
And I'm Belinda Kerr from Recruitment Garage, and together we're your hosts, bringing you a stellar lineup of recruitment tech and AI experts ready to help you understand and, more importantly, benefit from the increasing array of tech available to you today. Today on the Tech Savvy Recruiter, Andrew and I are joined by someone who needs very little introduction in the TA world, Mr. Tim Sackett. Tim is one of the most respected voices in HR and recruiting. In fact, he's a top 10 global HR influencer. He's a longtime practitioner, speaker, author, investor, tech analyst, advisor, president of HRU Technical Resources, and also co-founder of the HR Tech 100 Fund. So the list goes on. And if you've ever read anything smart, funny, or slightly provocative about the future of hiring, there's a good chance that Tim wrote it. He's been leading conversations on AI and recruiting, interview tech, screening, talent intelligence, and what all of this really means for recruitment right now. So Tim, as I said to you off camera, I am so pumped to have you join us, and let's dive in. And before we start, anything else that you would like to add?
So nothing to add. That was great.
So let's start broad, Tim. So as AI screening sits today, to your mind, what's working well? Where are companies seeing the biggest impact? And then on the flip side, where are we perhaps coming a little unstuck?
Yeah, it's interesting because we still don't have a lot of like real life like use cases of like using like I would say like real AI versus kind of the machine learning AI that we've been using over like the last 8 to 10 years. I mean, think about the normal recruiting process. They screen them, they send them on to a hiring manager and go, hey, here's the best people. Well, 80% of the people or more didn't even get looked at. And that's typical. Like I talked to a head of TA the other day that they were getting 750 applications per job for white collar jobs. And she knew right away over 700 of those people weren't getting looked at or more. And so AI screening allows every single one of those candidates to actually be a part of the process, to actually get into the game. So to me, right away, your quality of hire is going to go up. Because you went from a recruiter, whether they're trained or not, unconscious bias, conscious bias, everything that we put in there, you're not looking at everybody. You're just looking at like the last ones that applied or, the ones of the names you could pronounce or whatever. So right away, your quality of hire is going to go up. And then what we're also seeing is your time to fill actually is actually moving faster as well because you're getting higher quality people into the process faster. Recruiters are seeing those who are interested faster, so thus they can then move on in that process to the next step, which could be another recruiter interview, a hiring manager interview, whatever that might be. So, I mean, right now it's all positive. I haven't seen one negative. I take that back because the one negative we'll see are usually heads of HR, hiring managers going, well, candidates won't want to be screened by AI. Actually, the numbers actually don't say that. The numbers actually play out that like in the like kind of low to mid 90 percentile of candidates are fine with it and go ahead and do it. Part of that though is the setup. So if you're an HR leader, you're a TA leader, or even a hiring manager, like giving a small like micro video, like 30 seconds to the candidate going, hey, we understand this might seem impersonal to you, but we want to give everybody a chance. We want everybody to be having at bat, right? And to be able to come through the process. And so we're using the technology. And then from there, we'll have, throughout the process, we're going to have real people and you'll talk to real people. But this is the first step and we want to invite you to be a part of it. And what we see is mass adoption of that when something like that happens.
Well, the way that's said is just so engaging, isn't it? It's making the people feel important and included as opposed to, oh yeah, we'll interview if we have to.
Yeah. Well, because we still have this massive black hole issue with candidates, right? Like they apply to 100 jobs, they don't hear from anybody and you're like, what's going on? And what we know behind the scenes is what's going on is no one's even seen your application. Because you're one of hundreds that are there. And the recruiter doesn't have capacity to look at everybody. When you have this ability to use AI to screen everybody, and I think potentially as we go, well, they'll also like, I keep looking for this interface for candidate experience where a candidate can go, hey, I screened like 3 days ago. I haven't heard anything. And the AI can go, we're still going through those screens, right? We still have more people that are doing this. The next step is this. There's still not any tech that's doing that. Part of that is you have to give the AI access to like all your signals, and you have to know your process is being followed and stuff like that. But there's some really cool stuff in the pipeline, I think, that we're going to see with AI.
That's exciting. And I know you're on top of it. So if you're not already following Tim, follow Tim, because he has some amazing content on LinkedIn for sure. Well, that's where I follow you anyway, on LinkedIn.
That's the easy part, right?
And Tim, from what I've been seeing, it's also that customer experience as well. So getting the candidate the best customer experience as possible, because you're right, the black hole is real. It's going to be here for a long time as our technology adoption continues. And the last thing I want for a candidate is the brand experience to be apply now and then radio silence, which is unfortunately often we can't bypass that. And I think you touched on something which I'm really passionate around, is that, that 750 applicant could be the big gold deposit that, a mining company is looking for. But because we just scratch the surface normally as a recruiter, we get the first layer and then that's it. And we stop digging in that one spot. And unfortunately, there's a lot of gold sitting there that we just can't physically process. And that's what I love about the way that technology is heading. It gives everybody a fair chance, gives everybody their voice to be heard.
Yeah, Andrew, you're 100% correct. And I find like most executives don't even realize what's actually happening. They just feel like, oh, we have this team that's uncovering the best talent that's available for us. And you're like, no, they're not. They're surviving. And again, I love recruiters. I love recruiting. I understand that like the problem they have and the capacity issue they have.
This is really it's almost mind blowing, isn't it? Because whenever I started recruitment 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago, and it's been the perennial problem, candidates, got back to me, but like, if this one problem is solved and people get heard and seen and the cream rises to the top, like to me, that is a total game changer in the whole of the recruitment landscape. Because there's all sorts of problems we hear along the way, but the biggest, longest standing one has always been candidates hate recruiters because they never get back to them.
I always see it as like a DE&I kind of evolutional problem as well. Like in the United States, because of the current administration politically, DE&I is kind of taking a back seat in a lot of ways, right? And I think the world looks at us and goes kind of like, what's going on over there? I take a look at AI as the opposite of this, of being able to actually make it the most inclusive process we've ever had. I always go back and take a look, like 10 years ago is when DE&I became really big in the United States. And the core foundational aspect of DE&I in recruiting was, hey, we need to open the aperture. We need to fish in more ponds. We need to get everybody involved, because then we're going to hire the best and brightest if we actually do that. And then it got taken hostage by a lot of factions, right, in the United States, and it became something that it wasn't foundationally. And so this to me gives it back to, at the end of the day, how are we giving everybody a shot at these jobs and then making sure we hire the best people? And I think AI is going to give us that option. So I'm really excited about it.
Yeah. That's great. I love that that's your take on it, because to be honest, I was expecting a big flip side as well, but the fact that it's not there is that's a good way to end the week. Well, it's Friday here for us, but not for you. You've got to keep going.
But where it comes to interview technology as it is today, and where you see the biggest disruptors that are coming for us, putting that lens on, how do you think agencies should be approaching what's happening in our market, and where should we be investing as professionals to make sure we're staying up and maybe getting ahead of the game as well?
I love interview technology. One is just the ability there's a lot of ways that this can be used. One is, if I'm interviewing you, Andrew, and we're having this conversation and I'm a normal recruiter, I'm literally heads down taking notes, and I'm not half listening, half writing, half trying to develop this marketing, for the hiring manager as you're talking. And if I have technology layered in, I now can have a real conversation with you one-on-one, and I'm going to get all of that. And the whole transcript is going to be given to me, right? So I don't have to worry about taking one note. And then the other piece of it on the hiring manager side is when I need consistent interviewing, right? I don't need a hiring manager asking Andrew one question because he's a man, and then Belinda a different question because she's a female. I want to make sure it's consistent. And if I have AI that's listening, I can make sure that there's prompting this manager to say, oh, by the way, hey, you need to ask this question, right? Or you need to do this. The other thing is, and so this is a lot of this technology is being built and coming out. Imagine an interviewee, a candidate that's interviewing with 3 different hiring managers. Right now, those 3 different hiring managers really have no insight to what that person is telling that one hiring manager to you to the next one. Whereas if I had AI involved, they could go, hey, by the way, that candidate, when they talked to Andrew, said this, and now they're saying this. You need to dig into this a little bit more and figure out what's the truth, right? In terms of they're conflicting themselves. And so there's some really powerful tools like that we could go and figure out. Is a candidate gaming, trying to figure out what do I want to hear versus telling me what we really need to know about them, I think is really powerful from that standpoint. And then having AI being able to compare candidates around real specific questions, because we tend to get into these, the interview pools, and we bring everybody in. We're like, okay, what do you think about Tim? What do you think about Belinda? And we all start doing this dance where AI can go, well, I'll tell you exactly how Andrew, Tim, and Belinda answered this exact question. And now let's like compare them from data and really dig into it. And so again, it eliminates a lot of the like unconscious bias we have during the interview process. And so again, it's one of those things where I'm so excited about what's coming
It
up.
really shines a light on how much bias has been there, doesn't it?
And it's so funny, Belinda, because you say that, and all the way through this year when I was speaking at conferences, and I would ask people, who do you think is more biased, AI or a hiring manager? And almost everybody would say AI. And I had a Stanford AI professor on a panel with me, and he explained it perfectly, where he said, every time you add a human into any part of any process, you increase bias. And every time you add AI into any part of a process, you decrease bias. And he goes, and I can measure that with data and show you. And so it's a misnomer we think, because the problem we have is we think AI should be perfect, and it's not going to be perfect. But is it going to be better than our hiring managers, who we know have unconscious bias and real bias and all these other things? At least with AI, I can actually audit and measure for that bias and understand. So it's starting to show up here. We need to correct for this, right? Where I can't with the human.
And it's interesting, Tim, when you say unconscious and conscious, because, none of us really know personally how much unconscious bias we have, because it sort of just sits in the back of our brain somewhere. But the conscious bias, we can deal with. But I don't know. I would probably guess that unconscious bias is probably the worst contender. I could be wrong, but that's just gut feel for me.
We've interviewed, and worked with a lot of hiring managers over time. And I know for me, I've had hiring managers that I knew were like sexist or racist or something, right? But we are allowing them to interview. And because we had to maintain this relationship, we couldn't really call them out on it, because then it was going to be this big blow up, and they were going to deny it, and they were going to hate me. And so we do this dance where we kind of just
ignore the problem.
We kind of ignore it, for lack of a better way to deal with it. And I think they're both pretty dangerous, because I think we're so conflict avoidant as humans. We don't call out really bad hiring managers on their bias.
So at what point, Tim, then do we put that human layer on it? So say, for example, I've got a team and I've got 8 blokes, and I just want a bit of female energy in there to, mix it up a little bit. But the AI is kind of screening for not that. Do you feel like this process comes in at the end, or when do we start adding that in?
I think it's going to be dependent, in terms of what your goals are as an organization around equity and inclusion, belonging, so like one thing I love about kind of the data and the AI piece is I know, let's just say that in my hiring funnel, I have 50% female and 50% male. And then somewhere along the line, all of a sudden I start to see, well, wait a minute, why is it 70-30? Clearly I know there's something going on here that's creating inequity. That's where I think we need to start paying more attention to and understand that it could be an assessment. It could be a screen. It could be a hiring manager. It could be a lot of things, right? It could be when they come on site, they just, I was just at a company today, and it was like 85% males. It was a very tech company, drones and defense and all this stuff, a lot of soldiers. Well, you can imagine most females coming into that environment are going to be intimidated. And so how do we combat that? Well, I got to make sure I have females in the interview panels. I got to make sure they're being presented and they're being walked around by other females so that they can go, hey, like they can actually have this conversation. And sometimes we just overlook some of that stuff, and we just go, well, no, this is just who we are. And you're like, well, do we have to be that way?
It's true. So what you say there about the females in that situation, I had a situation yesterday. My daughter, she's just finished school and she's looking for just a summer job. She went for a job as a kitchen hand. She thought it'd be great, didn't it? She just wanted to get in and, dig in and just do some work and earn some cash. And the woman said to her, oh, darling, she said, I couldn't put you in this kitchen with all these men. They swear so much. And she came home and she was livid. She was like, I can swear just as much as them. It was interesting. It was an interesting conversation.
It's a great real life example, because I actually ran a TA for Applebee's, and most of our kitchens were Hispanic males in the United States. And the women that I would see there I would go into a kitchen and I'm assuming that I'm going to see mostly men. And every once in a while I would see a woman, and she gave it back just as much as she got it. Like that was like, you had to have the right personality for that, for sure.
Well, Molly holds her own. She was pretty like, She was really quite affronted. Anyway, I was like, yeah, it's all part of the learning, love. Keep going. Next job. So, Tim, something that I'm really fascinated by, and I probably shouldn't be as interested, I shouldn't be as excited about as I am. I just think it's really interesting, is this whole concept of the candidate fraud and fake resumes and fake interviews. Someone was telling me the other day that if you're being interviewed and you think it's by an avatar, you should ask it to show its hands because the avatars don't have hands. I thought that was really fascinating.
There's a lot of there are people will say like, you gotta put your hand in front of your face because then you can see like the filter and the stuff happening and all of this stuff.
It's crazy, isn't it? So where are we going with all of this?
I do think it's probably one of the biggest technology advancements we'll see in 2026 is companies really leaning into how big of a deal is this fraud piece. And here's what I'm finding is there's two kinds of fraud. I call it big F and little f. The little f fraud is the things like a candidate using ChatGPT to write their resume or to answer a question or things like that, right? Is it fraudulent? It is, but like if it's a tool they're going to be using in the work world anyways, do we really care that they used ChatGPT to answer a question? I might want them to use ChatGPT in their job. So I want to know that they can actually use it. I call that like the little f fraud. The big F fraud that we're seeing is when you have bad actors. So you might have a hacker from North Korea or something like that is presenting themselves as a software engineer sitting in Phoenix, Arizona, and they're going through the entire interview process and somebody's hiring them remotely. And then they're getting access to your systems and they're holding your systems hostage for ransom kind of thing. And people go, well, we wouldn't hire a North Korean person. Like, you don't understand. You're not hiring a North Korean person. This is what AI is doing is it makes you believe that they're an American, their IP address, everything about them is saying that they're sitting in Arizona and they look like an American. They're talking like an American. And the problem is people say that's not a big deal until it happens to you. Then it's the actually number one deal that your company's ever faced. Your company's literally shut down overnight and being held hostage. And what we've found is that companies are constantly trying to be attacked, right? In cybersecurity, what they've uncovered is that the interview process and the hiring process might be the weakest link for a cybersecurity bad actor for them to kind of get into the systems. And we do a pretty good job of locking down like our systems and all this stuff, except if you're an actual employee. And then we started hiring all these remote employees and we really don't have any idea who they really are if they decide they want to be a bad actor.
It's often the weakest link, isn't it?
So there are companies like Applicant X, I think I've seen, like when I was at HR Tech this year, I think there was like 3 or 4 that were coming on market that were trying to handle different pieces of this, right? Even the big credit agencies in the US, like Experian and some of those are really looking into this of like, how can we be a part of this kind of candidate fraud piece?
Yeah, there was somebody I saw in one of your posts recently. Here, Applicant X was one I saw that you were talking about.
The CrossCheck company came out with that this year. And they're looking at it from a lot of different things. And like, it's kind of like the airport security piece, right? When you go through like a Clear or some of these companies that have kind of airport security, this is just, hey, how do you validate that Belinda's Belinda and Andrew's Andrew? Like, how do you really know somebody's who they are? Just because you're seeing them on camera doesn't mean that's who they are. And AI has gotten so good that it's hard to really kind of determine.
So what are you recommending, Tim, that people start to think about doing to, I guess, both educate themselves and mitigate their risk?
Yeah, I think Greenhouse, which is one of the big ATSs, found like upwards of 20% of applicants right now are fraudulent in some capacity. And so that's a crazy number to think about. And again, a lot of it's the little f fraud. They're using AI to write their resume, and you're like, well, just because they used AI doesn't make it fraudulent. It's just, they're just using a tool. But again, it depends on what people kind of want to call that. I think people just have to realize, kind of where they're at risk. And if you're going to have somebody that has access to your systems, your financial systems, your computer systems, whatever that might be, maybe it's time to start doing some in-person interviews again, right? Maybe it's like, even though this person could work remotely, we're going to fly you in and actually have you interview with the team and spend a little bit more money. Like I said, people think it's not going to happen to them until it does. And then it's literally the biggest thing that will ever happen to your company. Like I was at dinner with a bunch of TA leaders and they all were like, oh, Tim, that's not a big deal. And then I explained that and they're all looking at me like,
I wish we hadn't had this conversation.
It's different. Like I didn't think of it that way. Yes. I didn't need to know this,
I mean, the damage somebody could do in one night
or a little drip over time.
And the crazy part is when you talk to chief security officers, they're really keen on this. Like they want to have this conversation because they know it's a weak spot. And like most of our TA leaders and HR leaders just don't realize how accessible their system or their process is to having a bad actor come in.
Yeah, so the big thing there is around remote work. But I guess, of course, too, it could be someone who's faked their way in
That's
and is a
happened.
real person, but that's less, I think, like you say, the highlighting the remote
I think you touched on something which I was reading about.
Isn't it?
And I still think you need remote work. I just think we have to figure out, is this person, is
identifying
Andrew really
human
Andrew,
and
right?
identifying,
Yeah, well, it's only going to get more so,
am.
isn't it?
Yeah, which is going to be an interesting conundrum. I was reading the other day around maybe the prevalence of interview hubs and things like that. So you say, well, Andrew, let's interview you. We've got an interview hub. It's downtown on this street. We've checked you in. All you have to do is present yourself. They'll do a little ID check, physical ID check. So bring your physical ID, and then they go into a booth, and then you jump on a call with me. So those physical, we'll get back to maybe not, I have to sit in front of you, Tim, but there's a secure space that we've quarantined and, doing the best we can to validate human and validate the person is actually in the city that they say they are.
We can always find a solution. It's just, we have to understand, again, like what's the big, is it something we have to do or should be doing? I think if you talk to your IT security teams, they would be 100% we should be doing.
You've got to take that, business approach as well with the, the extreme, well, in a perfect world, we do A, B, C through Z. And then, okay, well, we can probably do K.
Yeah.
Okay, that's feasible. And then the rest we'll have to put in our risk mitigation plan.
It's a little bit sort of off track, but we had a cybersecurity gentleman come in and speak to my guys recently. And he was saying, 80 to 90% of it you can do pretty quickly and pretty cheaply to safeguard yourself. And then that last bit, you kind of need to invest some money. But he said most people just aren't doing the basics. And so I think that's a lesson for us all, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, there's a lot of tech out there that you can piece together to kind of get there, and I think the question is always going to be is like we just have to make it as easy and user friendly as possible for the process.
We've been talking a little bit about what's happening today, Tim, but I was just thinking if we fast forward, say 3 to 5 years, I know that's a very long time now in the world of tech. I don't talk about that much now because my brain can't calculate things 3 to 5 years. However, let's try and, get the grey matter working over time. I can see some steam coming out of your ears already, Tim. But if we were to look that window of time, what do you think the interviewing process might look like in a discussion we've just had? So just paint a picture maybe of what it could look like there.
Yeah. Again, because of, I think, all the advantages of like the AI screening, AI interviewing, I think, we're going to see a high 90 percentile of candidates, whether they're white collar, blue collar, being screened and interviewed by AI as a kind of a first round set, right? We're going to see more kind of low friction assessment type things to get people to kind of prove out what they can do and can't do from that standpoint. And then I think, we'll start to see more emphasis around when the humans layered in around cultural fit. Does your crazy match our crazy? Because one of the things that happened with DE&I is we went away from cultural fit and about skills. It doesn't matter if they're female or black or white or purple or furry or, whatever they are. It doesn't matter. Well, if they have the skills, then they have the skills. Well, I have an example that just happened to us recently. We hired a software engineer into a defense company, and I get a call like 2 weeks in, and the hiring manager's like, they're refusing to work on this project because it's a missile project that could kill somebody, and that's against what their beliefs. And you're like, no, this is a defense company. You knew you were coming to work for a defense company. Nobody had the conversation to say, hey, are you an objective? Do you have an objection to like making equipment potentially that could harm life? And that's just a simple example of we've gotten away from, in the US, like Amazon's known to be a really type A culture. And I remember maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, the New York Times did this big expose about how bad of an employer they were. And what they really were saying is, if you're not a type A person, this is a terrible company to work for. If you're a type A person, this is an amazing rocket ship of a company that you're going to grow your career and work hard, and this is going to be amazing for you. But they took the opposite side and said, well, no, like what you're saying is like you want some company's culture to be inclusive of every single person. Now, I want to be inclusive of every single person that can do the job that wants to work at my company. And that we've lost that piece of it. And what we're starting to see when people are layering in AI for screening and interviewing is now they can spend a lot of time to go, hey, here's who we are. Like, I want you to understand that. And do you want to be a part of who we are? And then also, who are you? And also, by the way, here's this hiring manager over here, and they have their own microculture, and here's who they are. And do you think you want to work with that kind of person? And the hiring managers come back and we're like, oh, wow, every person I'm interviewing, like, they're really well, they're on. Like, this is great. But we've actually gotten away from, we got so skill focused that we got away from, I need skills and I want you, and I need you to want to work here. Like, those two things together are really important. I can't just have one. I can't have you just want to work here and you have no skill. That doesn't work either.
It's interesting. I think with the right technology there, it can think of all this stuff that I might forget on a particular assignment, right? So it just has that all-encompassing perspective. This is the way that we'd like to progress with our interview process. This is the way our recruiting works. And then it builds a beautiful complex model. And, with the right maybe questions lined up for a, defense contractor who will be, building stuff that, is designed maybe not to produce life, right? So it's, and they'll slip in a question there, what's your ethical stance on A, B, C? And, thanks for coming.
The other side of that interview process question is we're going to do a much better job of AI will know who our best candidates are right away. So like, let's say you're interviewing 5, you've already interviewed 3, and maybe 1 out of the 3 is a for sure potential. AI is going to know that we need to keep this person on the hook. We need to keep engaging this person and letting them know. We can't let them fall into the black hole. And then all of a sudden 2 weeks later, we come back to them the first time and they're like, I'm not interested. Like, you guys didn't pay attention to me at all. Or even on the onboarding, pre-boarding side of engaging this person so that we have fewer fall offs from offer to actually showing up, acceptance, stuff like that. We're going to see a much more kind of a multimedia back and forth, engaging with candidates where, maybe after the candidate accepts, they're going to, all of a sudden they'll get a quick little video from the hiring manager.
It's almost that onboarding process starts.
Things that we could do right now.
That acceptance comes through. It's really important.
Yeah. Yeah. And making sure that we actually keep them again, engaged that entire time.
So much work up to this point. You've got the right candidate. They've said yes, you're a happy family. And then often there's a void. And it could be sometimes, there could be 6-8 weeks, maybe, in between acceptance and actually starting a role. And that's a long time not to hear anything from your future employer. So only the hiring cycle where
it feels like forever if you're a candidate, right?
Is this still happening kind of thing? Yeah.
Think about if you interviewed for a job, you get done interviewing, you feel like, oh my gosh, that went great. And then it feels like an eternity, even if it's a day before you hear anything. And if it's 3 or 4 days, at that point, you're like, well,
we are designed with negative bias.
It's like
internally, aren't we? So if we don't hear anything, we are assuming the worst. During the hiring cycle, I think you touched on it earlier in the conversation, having, one step and then crickets for 2, 3, 4 days is really allowing that person to maybe think too much. And, we think, oh, okay, it's not progressing. I'll keep looking. They get a call from another agency and then they're starting another process where it's all actually beautiful behind the scenes. You're the ideal candidate, but we just haven't, kept you warm during that process. We did
I think a really kind of cool study around this. I had a client that we were working with that had massive no-show for interviews, like a blue collar kind of client. And they were only getting 4 out of 10 to show up. And they were just like, this is a massive problem. And so all we did was when we set up like a candidate, so let's say it's a Monday, we're saying, hey, you're going to interview on a Friday. Every single day we would send them kind of a call to action where the day, like the second day might, or, really we actually do it day 1. So like say it's like, 9 in the morning and we set up a thing. Like at 1, we would send them a message and go, hey, I can't remember the time I told you that you're going to interview on Friday. Could you just text me back the time I told you? And I'm going to make sure I put it in my calendar. And it was just a call to action. Like, are you still kind of engaged? And then the next day was, oh my gosh, our security team needs a copy of your license. Can you just take a picture of it and send it to me? Because if they don't respond, then you're like, wait a minute, something's going on. And so we did that all the way up until the very, even the day that they were supposed to interview, 2 hours before they were interviewed, they would get a text message that said, hey, we know life happens. You might have already accepted another job. You might have had something else come up. If you have to cancel the interview, we understand. No hard feelings. Just let us know. Right. So we could give the time back to the hiring manager. And we had about 10% of people actually respond to that and actually cancel. But what we ended up with then was 90%. So 9 out of 10 actually showed up. And then we would go and interview them after and say, with all the stuff going on in the world, like, why did you show up for this interview? And across the board, the verbatims were, for the first time ever in my life, I felt like a company wanted me.
Yeah.
And it was all
I
automation.
think people undervalue that stuff. So,
Crazy,
it's one of those set and forget things, Tim, isn't it? You set up the process and then it happens for everybody. It's a beautiful way to keep that person engaged with the process. It shows that you're taking a true interest in what's happening for them. And be it automation or not, I know it's coming through as a text message and the person at the other end didn't type that thing, but I don't care about that. It's like when you get a reminder for your medical appointment next week saying, hey, Andrew, we've got you seeing Dr. X. Yeah.
It's nudge. Yeah. It's that nudge technology of like, you're thankful for it. It's like, okay, cool. Like,
What I find interesting about that, and if I heard correctly, Tim, you said that only 10% responded, but you got a 90% increase in show up rates. So did I hear that?
I think they declined.
So some people actually.
No, the 10% were the people that they were never going to show, but we gave them the option to let us know that they weren't going to show in a way that was humanizing, right, for them. I wasn't going to blackball you. I wasn't going to hate you for the rest of your life. We were just very upfront about like, we get it. Like, we understand. Like, let's be adults, right?
Got it. But that's a big increase, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh gosh, it was huge.
90% show up.
And part of it was too, what we find with the hiring managers were just like, they would be okay if I called them 2 hours before an interview and said, hey, by the way, want to let you know your 11 o'clock's not going to happen. They had something come up. We're going to cancel it. They were thankful. If they showed up at 11, the interview wasn't there, they were pissed off. They were angry that I wasted their time. And so it was crazy how that also had this huge impact on the hiring managers believing the recruiting team was actually helping them and giving them their time back by just letting them know, right?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because on the face of it, it just seems so obvious and so simple, and it's not hard to implement. But we're over here trying to like build the next rocket when we can just look what we're doing in our own, just in our current flow of work. And there's so many little 1%ers that we could get that, spend a bit of time automating, thinking it through, God forbid, getting in the shoes of our clients and our candidates, and what is the experience like for them? I think there's so many wins to have quite quickly. And now, like you say, Tim, with AI, we can just, really skyrocket this stuff and get it working much faster. And I guess, the flip side of that is the people who aren't sort of having those initiatives like you guys did are going to be the ones that sink, sadly.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And again, like you said, this isn't like, we're not trying to put it like a person on the moon, right? Like it's process stuff that you follow through on and you do the right things. And, does it create, like, it's funny because people always think, well, gosh, it's so much more work. But for me, it's like, there's a give and take to this, because if I have more people actually show up for interviews and I can close more deals and more people show up day one, overall, it's actually less work. I have fewer false positives. So
often the work is front loaded, and that's why people, like, I see it all the time with like all the founders that are like, so I only coach small recruitment agency founders, and so many of them, they're just so busy on the hamster wheel. And I say, but if you could spend a day doing this and building this system and front loading your time here, I can promise you the next 6 months, 12 months is going to be a whole lot easier. But getting across that line is really hard sometimes.
So hard. If it was easy, everybody would do it, right? So like that's what we know.
But that's where the winners have got to play. They've got to look at, and your example is a perfect one. Once all that's set up and done, it's set up and done. The next time they've got a new client, they just hit the automation and off it goes. There's no more work to do.
Oh yeah. And the client thinks you're, amazing because you solved their issue of ghosting candidates all, nonstop.
It's a really lovely, easy example to kind of just show what's possible. So Tim, let's talk about data, because data obviously is becoming more and more important and critical. And, we're hearing all the time about hiring decisions are going to be leaning more on data than the emotional side or whatever it is. So when it comes to TA and data, what do we need to be thinking about? What should we be measuring? What are your thoughts around the importance of it in the process?
Yeah, I want to start with the one piece of data that we all use that I hate, and I think it has zero causation to what we do, which is time to fill. We're stuck with this metric over the last 2 or 3 decades in TA as a success metric. And I truly believe it's not a success metric. You guys are in your summer in Australia right now. And what we know in the summer is, it's that classic ice cream sales go up and shark attacks go up. And so if we just stop selling ice cream, we can end shark attacks. And you're like, you can correlate just about anything. So when people say, oh, well, we need to worry about being faster at recruiting, I could actually argue that if you were a little slower, you would be better. Exactly the same way you could say if you're faster, you're better. I could say if you were slower, you'd be better. And so the timing metric of that to me is just it's a health metric. If you know your average time to fill a job is 40 days and you're at 80 days, okay, you have a problem. Like you're unhealthy. But if you're at 41 days or 39 days, you're no worse or no better. You're in the ballpark. You're fine. Like it's just one of those things. So then I look at it from the side of what our operators really want to know. So what our executives want to know is like, what can you deliver to me? So what's our capacity of recruiting? If I have a team of 10 and I know I need to fill 250 positions, can I go to my executives and say, without a doubt, we 100% are going to be able to fill those jobs? Or what we see mostly in the industry are, those recruiting leaders fail because they can't produce, but they have no idea what their capacity is. And so to me, like understanding what your capacity for recruiting is and how you build that, which is really just taking your funnel metrics that we would normally use for recruiting and reverse engineering the math. So if I know I need to have 50 people on the top of the funnel and I need to screen 10 of those to get to 5 interviews, to get to whatever, and I know like I need to hire so many people throughout the quarter, I can look at my average recruiter, not my best recruiter, because no one can keep up with the best. I can look at my average and I can build a capacity model to say, hey, we're actually at 90% capacity, or we're at 100% capacity and you're asking me for more. And I'm going to tell you right now, we're going to fail unless I have this resource, and this resource, So to me, whether you're corporate or agency, understanding the capacity of your team is super important when you go to a client or you go to, a hiring manager and say, yeah, we can deliver on this. So the delivery side of the data becomes really important. And it all starts with just, you have to measure your funnel and know what that funnel is and know what it takes to actually fill a job. And, Belinda, like I think you see it too, is we still have so many people that refuse to measure their funnel because it holds them accountable and it holds their team accountable.
The biggest thing that, and again, I can only speak for founders. I don't work with consultants, but when it's the founders running the smaller business, when it gets to the measurement bit, they get
I was only speaking because and often the problem comes from the top. I was only speaking with a company yesterday and there was a director on that call and he said, Andrew, I'm the worst of the people in terms of putting data into the system. Okay. And I said, well, therein is an issue because if the leader is not leading in the way that you need to have meaningful data in your system, it's garbage in, garbage out, or nothing in, nothing out. The best AI assistant can't do anything with the zero. So, which I'm kind of excited about because I think the advent of what's coming in the next wave of technology will help me be a better recruiter, also help me put the right information in. Stemming back to maybe one of the original comments about some of the technology that you love, note takers, extracting key data points from conversation that we're having and whacking it in the tracking system so that, speaking with the candidate, I've already put in what the dollars they're looking for, their availability, maybe skill coding that particular record on top of everything else, just from the conversation that we've been having, then running it through its machinations behind the scenes. And then by the time I even look at that candidate record after I jump off the call, 70% of the job's done and I can polish the last 30% with my human eye.
The one thing I get a lot of people ask me, a lot of leaders in recruiting will say like, well, Tim, I can't get my team to like use our systems and the tools we give them and blah, blah, blah. And how do you get 100% adoption? Like my team's 100% adopted with the technology we use. And it's two. One is a condition of employment. You're going to use the tools I give you because I believe that these tools make you better. The only way I know that is if you actually use the tool. So if you want to work here, this is what we're going to do. And then we actually measure touch points across our process within the technology. So I don't use a piece of technology that I can't add in a point. And so then when I go and pull the data, and we are a very transparent data organization, like any of my recruiters can pull data on themselves or any of the other recruiters or the full team, doesn't matter. They can pull all of that themselves. And we don't hide any of that. And so when somebody comes to me and says, oh no, I had 10 interviews last week. I didn't have 8. Nope. The system says you had 8. And that's what you're going to be judged on. And so we never have an issue with stuff being in our systems because they know, one is we're going to talk about it every single week and we're going to be accountable to these numbers. And, we're going to look at it because I need to know what we can deliver. And the only way we do that is if we're actually using the tools.
I see that transition all the time when we implement data tools for companies that haven't had them previously. And it is a bit of a change management process, but to do it as you've just described, if you use that tool to have you sit down one-on-one, they have to do zero prep for that meeting, which recruiters love because, I'm not going to spend 15, 30 minutes before my meeting with Tim, madly scribbling my activities so I can chat with Tim. It's all there. And two, it gives me a beautiful tool set to manage my desk as a little small business, which I think, people should take that perspective.
I never have conversations with my recruiters about the amount of time they work or where they work. I could care less. Like I have the data. And if somebody goes, Mary only worked 8 hours last week. Well, she killed it in 8 hours.
Yeah.
I could care less. She knows what the goals are and she can meet those and she can deliver. I don't care. And I don't care if she's sitting in Bora Bora or if she's sitting in a desk next to me. Like it doesn't matter to me. And like, so my team loves that because there's so much freedom within that of doing the work and how do they work, knowing that this is what we're really looking at. I'm looking at the end result. Now, we measure across because if somebody's struggling, I need to be able to get in and understand why is this happening? Like you're like, okay, you're here, you're doing really well, but then somewhere it's falling down here. And I'm not using it as a hammer. I'm using it as development to say, how can we help you? At the end of the day, I want my team to be super successful. And the only way I can do that is if we can figure out ways to help them.
I think too, the data thing that's becoming more important is that clients are increasingly relying on data to make decisions on who they engage. So if you can't show the data to your client, it looks sloppy. If the next person can, guess who's going to get the business?
Yeah,
I think that's important.
100%.
It's all coming together, I think. Well, there'll be fewer reasons for organizations not to be able to have a great recruitment tech stack that, perhaps enhances my performance by maybe 10% just off the bat by having the right tools in front of me, which I guess leads me to another question around, some of the stresses that are in some of our recruitment minds as leaders with AI on the table as it is. A lot of thought leaders like yourself are talking about the importance of being across that conversation, trying things out with little baby steps where you can. I guess on top of understanding the problem that you're trying to achieve and improve upon, which I think is a really important basic first step. But before you try any new tech, is there anything else you'd say about, help people look in the right direction or to make better tech decisions?
Yeah. I think you really have to understand. One is like, before you buy tech, like you have to talk to the people who are like actually kind of using it. And we tend to even though it's an obvious step, we skip that where before I try anything, or put anything into my own stack or shop, I there's a couple of things I do. One is I want to talk to somebody who's currently implementing your technology. And then I want to talk to somebody who's already a year in or a super user. I want to know how good it could be. And they love me giving me that one. Implementation one, they're always kind of like, oh, because they know it's going to be probably not a lot of happy conversations because it's a pain to implement. And then the last one is I want to talk to somebody who's recently left you because I want to know why, where it went bad. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And it's not going to stop me from using you. It'll probably help me in terms of making sure I don't make that same issue, right, or fault. And so for me on the technology side, I think we miss those conversations. We tend to get enamored by the demo. We buy and then we get upset that it doesn't do. And I'm like, and what I try to tell people all the time is like, do you understand companies spend thousands of hours and millions of dollars developing a demo when the sole purpose of that demo is to get you to say yes. That's it. It's not to show you their product. It's not to show you what they can do. It's to get you to say yes. And it works. And we say yes. And then we get really upset that it doesn't solve our problem because we didn't dig in enough to know that it was not going to solve our problem. It just was like, this looks amazing.
Similar to us not doing the reference check process, right? Which, unfortunately some recruiters also skip that verification that it does A, B, C. This is, an obvious one, but I think sometimes we do get caught up in the moment and go, this is going to be great. And then it comes to that implementation, which is a bit tricky. And then the change management, which is perhaps even trickier sometimes. And then it all becomes too hard and becomes, shelfware.
Definitely.
Tim, this has been an amazing conversation. And as I said to you off air, I was so excited to be having you on because I've been following you for a while and I just love the overview that you give. You're still on the tools in the business, recruiting and doing all sorts of exciting stuff, including your fund. And I'd love to give you a couple of minutes just to talk about what you're doing, where people can find you, because anyone who's not following you should be. You've got so much wisdom to share and you're so generous with it as well. So let's hear a little bit about you and what you're up to. I think it's really fascinating.
So it's interesting. I actually this whole concept started when I got invited to a charity event and it was called the 100 Men. And the concept was 100 guys show up to a local event with $250, so $25,000. And 2 charities came in and pitched. And at the end of the day, 1 charity walked away with $25,000. And that was it. We did it 4 times a year. But the call I got wasn't, hey, here's this thing we're doing. But the call I got was this. It was like, do you want to be one of the 100 men in our community that are helping charities? Well, of course I do. Like 100%, I want to be one of those guys. And so there's some FOMO there, right? And so I literally started talking to my friend George LaRock, who's in this HR Tech 100 fund with me in terms of building. And the concept was, What if we got 100 of us in the HR tech space that are insiders, that are founders, that are analysts, that are builders, that are practitioners, we know this stuff. We know the problems. We know what we need. We know what we don't need, versus the normal venture capital VCs that come in that have money, but they might even know what we do. And so the concept was $10,000 each, 100 people, $1 million to do early stage funding. And so angel funding basically to early stage companies. And we're in the process of gathering those 100 people right now. And it's not lost on me that 10,000 is still a lot of money. In the VC world, it's tiny, right? Like they won't even look at people if you don't have $1 million to invest. We're looking at $10,000, and we have people, coming in, literally heads of associations, founders, CTOs, CHROs, CTOs, or CPOs, analysts, like myself, influencers. But the one caveat was you have to be somewhat tied into recruiting tech or HR tech or something like that, right? We want you to have some skin in the game, in terms of what you care about, in terms of what you look at for. And then the thesis is these 100 would obviously invest in a company, but also these 100 are the most connected people in the world and would be able to help these startups really be, have a leg up on their competition.
Amazing.
So that's the pitch.
Amazing. So you're doing that, plus you've got your agency, plus there's a string of other things that you're up to as well. I don't think you'd be bored, would you?
No, I'm not like, I don't like, I'm the kind of guy on vacation. I can't like sit and read a book. I'm moving. So that's just kind of my MO from that standpoint. I'm an antsy person, and people, I think now they call it ADHD. My mom probably would love to have put me on medication. She just called it being a boy and, let me kick my feet, and I'm still kicking my feet,
We loved our conversation. I've been looking forward to it for a long time. I've learned a lot today, and I just love your really practical spin on AI, tech, all things recruitment, really, because I think sometimes there's a bit of a disconnect between, what can really help people and what's going on out there that's kind of a little bit too out of the conversation we need to be having. So I love that you bring it back to sort of grassroots and what's important. And so if people would like to reach out to you, Tim, what's the best way to do it? And who are the sorts of people that you'd like to hear from?
Yeah, at timsackett.com, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I mean, I just love to connect with people in our space, whether it's, recruiting leaders, recruiters, founders of recruiting tech. I tend to like kind of gravitate towards those kinds of individuals in my network. I think if you took a look at my LinkedIn, the people that I'm connected with, 90% of them have to be somewhat related to talent acquisition in some sort around the world.
Yeah, good. Okay. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. Any closing words, or will we set you free?
No, again, I'd love to have people reach out and connect. So I would love that, and love what you guys do and getting people on to share the knowledge, because that's how we continue to build this community.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Tim.
Yeah, thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode of The Tech Savvy Recruiter. If you'd like to stay up to date with the latest recruitment trends and insights, make sure that you remember to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Also, if you'd like to speak to Andrew about turning your tech stack into your secret weapon, or myself around creating an agency that delivers you more money, more meaning, and more freedom, we'd absolutely love to chat. Reach out to us on LinkedIn, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you for your support.